Today I'm making a drawstring bag out of the Olga embroidery kit. Now the kit comes with this square panel of linen, so you can leave it square if you want a square drawstring bag, but I've turned mine into a rounded bottom. So I've cut that around the edges because I like this shape. So what you're going to need for your drawstring bag is your embroidered piece, the same shape piece of backing, and then 2 pieces for the lining. All 4 pieces are going to be the same shape. Now if you're making your own drawstring like I am, I'm going to use 4 pieces of linen, and they're going to be just a little bit longer than the width of the bag. Then I'm going to sew them together to make 2 long pieces. I just didn't have enough fabric to make 2 long pieces, so that's why I'm piecing them together. There we are. They've now been stitched together, and then I'm just going to fold them because I actually need to make a drawstring. That will get ironed so that it's much easier to handle under the sewing machine. And then I'm just going to sew that really nice and close to the edge right there. And now I've got my 2 drawstrings. All right, you're going to get your front piece and a piece of lining, and you're going to sew along the top. They have to face each other. Now the backing piece and a second piece of lining, and again you're going to sew along the top, and they have to face each other. So there we go, we've got one piece and then the second piece. Now you're going to lay them over the top of each other, again facing, just like I'm doing here. And you're going to pin all the way around, but you've got to leave a gap at the bottom here. So now we're going to sew, making sure that you've got to leave that gap. Your hand has to fit in there. And you're going to try and do your best to line those sides up. There we go, that's sewn. Now we stick our arm in there and turn the whole lovely thing inside out. Now you're going to start seeing it all come together. Just sort of open up the bottom of the bag there. Now we have to sew this closed. This is the bottom part of the lining. That's pretty easy. You just stitch it and then stuff that lining inside, even it out as much as possible. And again, we're going to iron that flat because it's much easier to handle. Now we're going to do a top stitch close to the edge and then 2 more stitches for the channel. Now that channel is where we're going to be threading the drawstring through. Now I have to pause the video here because I actually made a mistake. Those 2 sewing lines that I made to make that channel for my drawstring are actually too narrow. They're too close together and my drawstrings are not going to fit through. So what I did is, without filming, I went back, unpicked those 2 sewing lines and actually made them a lot wider apart. They're about almost an inch apart because my drawstrings are quite thick. There you go. You see, that's way too small, but I did end up fixing it. Now what we're going to do is create an opening. You're going to use a seam ripper and you're just going to open one side, but not from the inside, not from the lining. And now you've got a hole to actually put your drawstring through. I'm just using a basic safety pin, and I'm using one of my drawstrings to pull through to one side, and then I'm going to start threading the other one in from the opposite side because you want them to sit one on the left and one on the right. There we are. There's one and then there's the other. Now the next thing I did was I actually finished off those little holes on either side. I really like this handmade or hand-stitched finish. And then this is how I finished off the drawstring ends. Now I just made this up. You might have your own way, which is much better, or maybe you don't need to do this at all because you're using a lovely ribbon or a string. I just tied them on the ends so that they kind of end up looking like shoelaces. This is a pretty simple method. There's nothing to it, and I'm just using embroidery thread to finish that off. Then I just tie a double knot and snip that off. And to finish off that sort of ratty end, I used my seam ripper to actually pull those fibers up, make it nice and fluffy, and then I trimmed it with a pair of scissors. And this is what they both end up looking like. I'm quite happy with that. Now, to make a handmade item look even more handmade, you always have to add a running stitch somewhere, right? So I just added that to along that little channel, and I think it looks really lovely. Kind of looks like it was hand sewn. Now there's what the holes look like on either side. I'm very happy with that finish. And it works. That's the most important thing. I really hope you enjoyed this project. Here are my other drawstring bags, and now I've added the blue one to my collection, and I think it's now my favorite.